Testing, 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Today's beats come from the Climate Chronicles. Today's beats are being done on October 2nd, 2019. We're going to be reading a little bit from an article by a bunch of researchers talking about the human imperative of stabilizing global climate change at 15 degrees, 1.5 degrees Celsius. Well, 15 would be way too much. All right, here we go. Climate change. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, was established in 1992 to pursue the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interferences with the climate system, unquote. Since 1992, 5 major climate change assessment cycles have been completed by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. These reports identified rapidly growing climate-related impacts and risks, including more intense storms, collapsing ecosystems, and record heat waves, among many others. Once thought to be tolerable, increases in global mean surface temperatures, GMST, of 2.0 degrees Celsius or higher than the pre-industrial period look increasingly unmanageable and hence dangerous to natural and human systems. The Paris Climate Agreement is the most recent attempt to establish international cooperation over climate change. This agreement, ratified or acceded to by 185 countries, was designed to bring nations together voluntarily to take ambitious action on migrating climate change, while also developing adaptation options and strategies, as well as guaranteeing the means of implementation, example, climate finance. The agreement is aimed at holding the increase of the global average temperatures to well below 2.0 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change, unquote. Many unanswered questions regarding 1.5 degrees Celsius target surrounding the feasibility, costs, and inherent risks to natural and human systems. Consequently, the countries invited to the IPCC to prepare a special report on the, quote, impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emissions pathways in the context of strengthening the global response to the threat of climate change, sustainable development, and efforts to eradicate poverty, unquote. The special report was completed and approved by the 48th session of the IPCC in October 2018. Advances. Multiple lines of evidence indicate that the next 0.5 degrees Celsius above today, which would take GMST from 1.0 degrees Celsius to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial period, would involve greater risks per unit temperature than those seen in the last 0.5 degrees Celsius increase, or half a degree Celsius increase. The principle of, quote, accelerating risk, unquote, is also likely to drive proportionally and possibly exponentially higher risk levels in the transition from 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2.0 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial period. We argue that this is a consequence of impacts accelerating as a function of distance from the optimal temperature for an organism or an ecosystem process. Coral reefs, for example, often appear healthy right up until the onset of mass coral bleaching and mortality, which can then destroy a reef within a few months. This also explains the observation of, quote, tipping points, where the condition of a group of organisms or an ecosystem can appear, quote, healthy, unquote, right up to the point of collapse, suggesting caution and extrapolating from measures of ecosystem condition to predict the future. Information of this nature needs to be combined with an appreciation of organisms' distance from their optimal temperature. Finally, we explore the relative costs and benefits associated with acting in response to climate change, and come to the preliminary conclusion that restraining average global temperatures above 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial period would be less costly by at least a factor of 4 to 5 than the damage due to inaction on global climate change. Outlook. As an IPCC expert group, we were asked to assess the impact of recent climate change, 1.0 degrees Celsius, 2017, and the likely impact over the next 0.5 degrees Celsius to 1.0 degrees Celsius of additional global warming. At the beginning of this exercise, many of us were concerned that the task would be hindered by a lack of expert literature available for 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2.0 degrees Celsius warmer worlds. Although this was the case at the time of the Paris Agreement, it has not been our experience 4 years later. With an accelerating amount of peer-reviewed scientific literature since the IPCC special report, Global Warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, it is very clear that there is an even more compelling case for deepening commitment and actions for stabilizing GMST at 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial period. Thank you for listening. Again, Science Magazine, edition October. Strike that. September 20th, 2019, 1 month off. And my name is Eduardo Rivero. Hope you enjoy.